Hi everyone, this is Alan McKay. Welcome to episode 78. I'm interviewing the legendary VFX supervisor, Jeffrey Okun. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Alan McKay Podcast. Alan is an Emmy Award-winning visual effects artist and mentor to many leading industry experts. Listen in as Alan talks with other industry leaders in film, video games, and visual effects about their experience, lessons, and methodology. Alan will teach you pivotal advice to fast-track your career, better your skills, and reach your ultimate dream job. Check out the latest episodes on alanmckay.com.
All right, so welcome to episode 78. I'm really excited about putting out this episode with Jeff Okun. So Jeff is a visual effects supervisor who's been around for quite a long time. He's worked on a lot of really phenomenal movies like Blood Diamond, Stargate, Sphere, Red Planet, Deep Blue Sea, Last Starfighter, a lot of other really influential movies to a lot of us, ones that we look back on and are probably quite fond of. And on top of that, he's also chair of Visual Effects Society for quite a long time as well. So Visual Effects Society, or VES, as well as the VES Awards and a heck of a lot of other stuff. So diving into this episode has been really fun, going over, I think it's like 38 years of industry experience and all these massive titles, as well as everything else that we discussed. It's been really cool, and I'm really humbled to have Jeff on here. And before we get started, a couple of things I was going to quickly dive into. One of the big things is that finally, I'm really excited about this. After a year and a half, I'm opening the mentorship up again. And so the Effects TD mentorship should be opening up in about a week and a half. And so it's been quite a while since we've opened it up for other people to join in the mentorship. So despite all the emails, private messages, everything, including everyone from the live action series also being like, hey, I want to get into the mentorship, it's really cool that this is happening. So I imagine it's going to fill up pretty damn quick, but I'll definitely mention more information about that as we get closer to the date. But definitely get on the Inner Circle, which is my private email list, and I'll be putting out a lot of new training as well as announcements, things like that, all tied around that very, very soon. So probably best to do that now or later today because, I'm going to be sending out a lot of cool stuff. The other thing is that I've been doing a lot of Facebook Live lately. It's been really awesome just kind of doing live webinars, live sessions, including a lot on confidence, which is one of those subjects I've had a lot of people mentioning in surveys, feedback, things like that about really having a lot of resistance when it's time to kind of really pull the trigger on taking the next step with a career, as well as doing career intensives. I've been doing live visual effects training, so 3D tutorials on a lot of dynamics, scripting, you name it. So that also includes some live podcast streams as well. So I'm going to be interviewing a few podcast guests live, which is going to be a lot of fun because we can do live Q&A. You guys can ask questions and answer them in real time. So I think that's going to be really cool. And I've also been doing that too, where it's wine, beer, or scotch, but doing Q&A sessions. So getting us all to hang out and just kind of shoot the shit just for fun. So that's always been fun too, just answering questions and, helping any way I can, wherever I can. It's been really cool. I've been really digging this platform. It's been awesome. Lots of cool stuff. I'm doing a couple of interviews live. There's so much cool stuff. So I'm trying to do like 3 different streams a week minimum. I've been pretty busy doing that. So if you want to check that out and you'll be able to get notified of any future Facebook live streams, just go to facebook.com/Alan F. McKay. I'll leave a link in the show notes. But basically, click the like button, and that way you'll get notifications on whenever I'm going live, and you can interact and talk to me there. So I think that's going to be really cool. That's it for now. Check out VFX rates. That also is something that I'm trying to really improve upon at the moment too. So much stuff going on. It's really awesome. I want to get right into this episode with Jeff. So let's get rolling. One last thing I'll just mention is a couple of cool episodes coming up. I'm interviewing a lot of the team at id Software for Doom. So I'm speaking with the effects lead the creative director, the creature lead, and a couple other people. There's lots of cool stuff. Actually, some really awesome episodes coming up with some of the biggest studios and their entire teams in the world. So yeah, I'm going to leave those ones as a surprise. But yeah, lately it's just been growing and growing and growing. So there's lots of great episodes coming up. All right, so let's dive into this episode with the legendary Jeff Okun. Hey, this is Alan. So just a quick thing to check out, www.vfxrates.com. This is a website that I created to solve a massive problem that we all have. What should we be charging? This is one of the giant mysteries that we all have, and most people feel very uncomfortable talking about, is what we should charge as a freelance rate. And the worst part is when we go to apply for a job, if we ask too much, we risk alienating the employer and never getting that call back. Whereas if we play it safe and ask too little, we not only get taken advantage of, but on top of that, we leave a lot of money on the table, which potentially over the span of a year can lead up to tens of thousands of dollars. So this is a chance for you to quickly go to the website, vfxrates.com, put in a few basic bits of information based on your city, your experience, your discipline, software, little factors that are very important to figuring out what you should be charging as your base rate when you're going to an employer. Now, this is based on a lot of research, but more importantly, it's based on a brain trust of industry experts from different fields that we've all pulled together, and being able to maintain this as a very accurate way to generate what you should be charging. The best part is not only what you should be charging, but also potentially what you could be charging by tweaking a few things to how you present yourself, building your brand, learning to negotiate better. Also, other factors like building an irresistible reel, learning to approach employers the correct way, learning to network, a lot of other factors. I want to share all this information for free. Go to www.vfxrates.com and find out what you should be charging for your hourly VFX rate. All right, Jeff, so can you just give a quick introduction to who you are and what do you do?
Well, I'm Jeff Okun. I'm a Visual Effects Supervisor and have been for way too many years. What it is that I do is I do two things mainly. One is I really try to create the uncreatable. If they could create it, they would, and they'd shoot it. And there's a lot of times when they should be doing that they don't. And the other thing that I do is I try to get inside a director's head to figure out what story he's telling and how he wants to tell it, and then circle around with enabling ideas to help him tell the story better, or in a more unique way, or larger canvas, or on a smaller budget, or whatever constraints are thrown into the mix by reality, like actors' unavailability due to other projects or death, and on it goes from there. It's fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I had no idea.
So yeah, I mean, I guess that's a good point is, as a VFX supervisor, you are really the person who kind of is the connection between essentially making everything happen. So when it isn't something that's initially shot, it's basically up to you to facilitate, getting a solution for it. You've got such a massive history too. And this is for me kind of what I want to nerd out about, is just the fact that you've been doing this longer than anyone, and at the same time have so many classic films and just massive insight into the industry as it's grown. So how do you initially start out? I mean, I don't imagine you could have just initially said, great, I'm going to do VFX or go do a course in visual effects, because obviously we didn't have that back then. But how did you initially kind of break into the industry and kind of transition over into visual effects when that became available?
How far back should I go?
Way back.
Well, first and foremost, I think more than anything, I wanted to be a magician. That followed after wanting to be a comedian. So those two things tied together taught me at a really young age, because of the study involved in it. It taught me two things. It taught me focus, and it taught me how to look at things differently. Okay, that's kind of a key element to everything, because there was no school for this. It was an old boys club. You either were the son or related to somebody, or you didn't do it. So my particular career path came out of great disappointment, in that as a young adult, I thought what I would be as a rock star like everybody else. And that cratered. And I'm editing in my own head about the crater story, which I don't think anybody cares about. Let's just say it wasn't my fault it cratered. How's that? There was troubles within the band, as they like to say. And it's important to note that when it cratered, Jimi Hendrix was the producer of our band. So that was even harder. Yeah. So the depression that followed that led me deep into my dark room, literally my dark room, where I would do still photographic tricks to amuse myself. Like I shot a picture of the Federal Building, I shot a picture of an American flag, and I said, I'll put this behind the Federal Building. This is at the end of the Vietnam War, and see if I could sell this as a poster to somebody, and it, much to my shock, sold. So I spent a long time in the dark room, and my next door neighbor was a composer and an arranger by the name of Jeff Alexander, who arranged for the Gershwin, did a lot of music for this crazy guy, Saul Bass, whose film Lyman Creates won an Oscar, and I saw it in high school or junior high, and I was going, oh, that's like cool stuff. I'd love to get involved with that. Turns out Jeff was doing a film for Saul and talked to Saul about me getting a job there. Then it turned out Saul's wife was a patient of my father's. My father was a dentist. So I went in and begged and pleaded and interviewed, and I got hired at Saul Bass as the gopher, which was a really interesting job. So you'd get there at 8:30 in the morning and get the donuts and make the coffees and put water in the machine, all the gopher stuff. Then you'd take care of people. Saul didn't drive, so you'd go pick Saul up, which was always very uncomfortable for me because I had a crappy little lime green Datsun 510 station wagon that I bought for $2,500. And here's the god of the graphics world who invented corporate design and reinvented logo sequences. So anyway, after a number of months, or I guess about 6 months working for Saul, he got this job because he used to do montage sequences in other films like Grand Prix, and a lot of Hitchcock films. He did the shower scene sequence. Wow. Although that's arguable, I did see the original storyboards, and that's what Hitchcock shot. Whether Hitchcock shot it or Saul shot it is the argument. That's neither here nor there. So the point, though, is that they had a sequence in this film they were doing for NBC called the 50th anniversary of NBC, which is a week-long event. And they cut it out, and the guy they hired, Gary Rockland, produced the whole thing. It was being very nice to me. And I said, Gary, I don't know anything about editing, but can I learn? And he said, yeah, take this film, and after hours, go ahead and cut. So every night from 5:30 till 6 in the morning, I would try to cut this sequence. After 6 weeks of this, they came back to me and they said, okay, we need this sequence, so undo whatever you did, and we're going to do it again. And I said, oh, you got to at least look at it. So Gary looked at it. Gary ran out, grabbed Saul, and Saul looked at it, and he ran out and grabbed Abby Mann or Abby Singer, or one of the Abbeys. And they looked at it, and so they said, okay, this is it. So that was the first thing I ever edited, and it got on national television without any changes in it. So Saul said to me, I tell you what, from now on, you're my editor. That was pivotal, because I said to him, I don't know anything about editing. He goes, yeah, I'll teach you. It's okay. What I didn't know is that he wasn't going to give me a raise. So I'm still working for $500 a month, but Saul did film work between 5:30 at night and 2 in the morning. So I was doing gophering from 8:30 until 5:30, film work from 5:30 till 2, and then I'd go home. Wow. So what I didn't know was that, Saul's literally world renowned for his imagery. And the way he arrived at it, he was very detail oriented, and he would cut quarter. And we would work on something that normal human beings would work on for 10 minutes and go, that's good enough. And Saul would be working on it for 3-4 days straight. Same thing over and over and over. Fix it one frame this way, 2 frames that way, do this. Let's try this piece of film. Let's do that. So we were bipacking and tri-packing and doing all sorts of things, and with the grease pencil marking dissolves. And then I'd have to go and because he was really deeply into not only graphic design of an image, but in a dissolve, halfway through a dissolve, you would stop it and look at it and see if that created yet another graphic image, an image worth keeping. So I did all that, and then I had to get it done. I knew nothing about opticals in those days, and I would go to the various optical houses, all of which Saul had been kicked out of because no one ever made money on him because he was that detail oriented. They would do it, and it wouldn't be right, and they'd do it, and it wouldn't be right, and then they'd have to make new IPs and do like
producers nightmare.
20, 30 iterations or something. But what I did, and probably another only smart thing I ever did, is that when I finally convinced one company to take Saul on, I said, and you have to understand, I know absolutely nothing about this, but I'm eager to learn. So they would take me into the camera operating rooms and the lineup rooms and the developing part of the lab. And they would show me how to do count sheets and all this stuff. And so over the course of years that I did this for Saul, it happened on one particular project, which was a commercial for Japan. And it was a 1 minute long commercial that had, I think, if I recall correctly, 96 layers of overlap involved in it, sometimes seven deep. So if they made a mistake, they had to throw the whole thing in.
Yep.
They told me it couldn't be done, that what Saul wanted to do couldn't be done. And I said, no, you could do it because you said if we could use a low contrast print instead of an IP, if we did this, and put that in the front projector head, you do this at the back, and you make an intermediate. And anyway, I showed them how to do it. And that started a whole new part of the relationship that ultimately ended like a year later with them going, hey, you know what? Maybe you should, we have a couple of problem clients. Why don't you go and consult with them? And so I became a consultant in optical effects. And being one of those guys is the best thing in the world because only three things can happen. One is there wasn't a problem, so there's nothing to fix, in which case you got the credit for fixing. Two, there was a problem that you could fix, in which case you got the credit for fixing it. Or three, there's no way to fix the problem. It was broken. It was a bad concept, in which case they go, well, thank you for getting to the bottom of that. So you're in a no-lose position. So over the course of 5 years, I did nothing but that. And that's how I got involved in like Die Hard 2, a couple of the other. That's actually how I got involved with The Last Starfighter, too, that ultimately ended up with Bob Shea of New Line coming to me and saying, hey, how would you like to fuck up a film from the beginning instead of coming in and fixing it at the end?
They're putting out all the fires.
Yeah, so I did my first film, and I was the visual effects supervisor and the editor. And from then on, I've been a visual effects supervisor. But I think the key to the whole thing is admitting what you don't know and asking for help. So along the way, amongst my many mentors there was a guy by the name of Peter Donen who was very smart and a lovely fellow who died prematurely of a horrible flu or something. But Peter was my go-to guy when I couldn't figure out how to do something. He worked with Ken Russell and worked a lot with Joel Silver. And then through Peter, I ended up at Apogee, taking a lot of work to Apogee. And at Apogee, John Dykstra became an unwitting mentor. And through my experience with that, which levered me into higher films, I ended up joining the Visual Effects Society. And next thing I know, I'm sitting next to Dennis Murin, who I thought was a tremendous asshole, by the way. I ran into Dennis, in an airport up in Oakland. And he was just so mean and so rude to me. And then later I realized that he was having a horrific flight problem. And right. I was trying to inject myself as his number one fan. But when we met at the VES, we became really good friends, and it's like then through that, came, Ken Ralston and Richard Edlin and John Knoll and, Pablo Hellman and Scott Squires and Jonathan Erlin. And I mean, it's just like a pantheon of the greats. And so I've never had a shortage of people to go to help solve problems. And what I learned is basically nobody knows how to solve them, but everybody has a theory on how to solve them.
I think it's
Your theory is as good as theirs. Yeah, well, I like to say visual effects is nothing more than problem solving. That's all we do.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, couldn't have said it better. I think that's the thing that when you do get in jobs where there's no problem solving, it's not very challenging. That the fun part is, oh shit, how are we going to solve? Okay, great, exactly like that. So yeah, I think that's really critical.
The thing about films, though, that's just the only standard thing about films is that you make a plan And if you can execute the plan, then everything is just awesome, but it seems to lack the spark of life into the project for some reason. Mm-hmm. Whereas you make the plan and all chaos breaks out and you're basically on set to problem solve and figure out how to get what you need while not stopping them from getting what they need, even though they don't want to cooperate with you whatsoever, blah, blah, blah. And it's led to many great stories that I can tell you.
I've had a few conversations about that like, in a way, as hellish and brutal, it's definitely something that you bond. Usually the really difficult projects you end up cherishing down the line. Experience that you went through, no too pleasant.
Yes, exactly.
Going back to, sorry to cut you off, I was going to say, like, going back to all the ops work that you're doing, and this kind of loops back to saying about problem solving. I was just going to ask, like, do you think by doing that and essentially coming in as a consultant to figure out, like, how the hell are we going to do it, or if it's impossible at all, do you think that really help grow artists rather than, let's say, doing more, we get the gigs in, this is what we do, you kind of being challenged how to resolve the, probably giving you a lot of massive in terms of learning?
I would say that, learning to dance, which is what it is like an amazing gift and skill. You work with so many different types. So the history, I don't know what to call it. That stuff that I had to learn that I love, because I was a button pusher. There was a button to push it. That's all there. And the gear in film, when it was film, man, there's all these great buttons to push, and they had these weird geary things that you could put film through, and we made games out, and you could string it all over a room. I mean, to play a loop in a theater so they could look at your 1 second clip, you print it 3 times and then you put it in what was called a loop tree in the projection. So you learn all these things. You learn splicing, you learn, color timing, which is a huge issue. You learn, latitude, you learn basically the cheats. So you learn to read the spec sheets and you learn, what's real and what isn't real and how much leeway there is. And, one of the big beefs that I have with the industry, I could divide it into 2 groups of people. There's the techies and there's the visualists. And the techies will tell you that the camera you're using or the software you're using or the hardware you're using is, 10-bit color, and it's just going to look like crap. And then you go and do something with that and you show it to them, which I have done, and said, okay, this was done in, full color resolution in film, and this was done in 10-bit off of this machine, which is which. You tell me which is which, and they never can guess.
Yeah.
They can only tell you what the specs tell you, and they forget to use their eyes to look at what's on the screen, because it's like it's like having the right tool for the right job. Sometimes all you need is a hammer. You don't need a jackhammer.
It's like arguing over lenses or anything else. Like you could go on about how this glass $300,000 lens is fantastic, but sometimes you can get away with shooting a shitty something that's only going to cost you $1,000 if you can still think visually.
That's proven like every day, because I've got a Sony A7 2S camera with the most expensive piece of glass, and I'm taking pictures. I'm going, I'm such a great photographer. And my wife pulls out her iPhone and does a snap, and you look at it and go, that's amazing. It's not the equipment, it's the eye. It's the same thing when it comes to tech. You like I say, you'll get guys that'll read you the tech, and you'll get guys that are visualists. As a supervisor, one of the big things that I have to do is I have to redefine reality. It's like I'm on a show right now, and it's all invisible visual effects, and it takes place 20,000 years ago and all this stuff. But the director has a sensibility about it, a look about it, where he wants it more like a graphic novel than he wants it to be a documentary feel, and all of the visual effects houses, will go, well, but the light is coming from the right-hand side of the frame in this cut, so in this cut, and you go, forget that. We're not interested in that. We're going from 24 frames a second to 1,200 frames a second in this shot. I don't care where the light's coming from. This is the graphic image we're making. So we come up with a term for it, and it's called, this film lives in a non-static reality. So stop telling me what's real. I know what's real. I know what I'm asking for too. Well, dog would never do that. That's right. Our dog does. That's why he's the star of our movie. Okay. I mean,
I like when you can have those discussions where it's like, okay, we're having this discussion once, and then every single time we, it's exactly, whatever it is, like this is exactly it. So that way it's like, okay, great. There's the reminder. And I mean, I've had that in production where we might initially show the director what is technically real, and that way we can discuss it. Yes, it's really boring. This is what we would get. Now let's go and make it. We want more interesting whenever we get that conversation of it doesn't look real. It's remember when we did real, and then you can go back to what you're doing rather than having that like let's go down the rabbit hole again and again in the wrong direction. So I think that's what you were saying before about sorry, go ahead.
Saul taught me that too, by the way, because Saul and we did the opening for the McNeil Lerner report. And what Saul liked to do is use new technology because he just liked new technology. And I was producing it as well as doing the editing and the visual effects on it. And we did it in an online day. And they were brand new back then. And it was costing us $8,000 a day to be in there. And the first 2 hours Saul spent discussing with the operator, the online editor, what red meant, what the color red meant. It was really, and I'm driving him home and I go, Saul, do you realize that you spent like $1,000 talking about the color red? And he was going, is that what you think happened there? He goes, we weren't talking about the color red. We were establishing a vocabulary by which we could work together. He goes, so if all you think we were doing is talking about red, he goes, you really missed the point.
Wow.
And he's right, because you got to establish your reality and your vocabulary before you can go anywhere.
Yeah, I love that. No, it's so true. Like, there's one thing I've kind of mentioned a lot is usually working on projects, let's say blowing something up. If you're simulating that, a lot of times I would have that director where instead of just putting one thing in front of them, you say, okay, well, here's a wimpy explosion. Here's a really big explosion. So that way, when I show the middle one, that's the one that I like. Whole balance. Whole point is that you show the wimpy one, then you establish this is too small. And then when you show the ridiculously big one, you can say, whoa, that's way too big. Rather than the typical route of make it bigger, make it bigger, make it bigger. Monday comes around, fresh eyes, whoa, too big. The only problem with that is whenever I show the ridiculously big one with intent of too big, they're like, that's it, that's the one, approved. And it's like, no, like what the hell? And it's always the case, like this has happened many times. They always go with the ridiculous one, which I'll even put that in there to kind of set that limit. But you're right, you establish that vocabulary, and that way you can work within bounds rather than, again, like going in 50 different directions. And especially when you've got finite time, like that's the killer.
Yeah. And we do. We have finite time and money on these things, more so with every project.
Are you finding that a lot at the moment? Like it's
Hollywood tends to they tend to set the release date and then figure out if they have a script and who's going to be in it and who's going to direct it and what the budget is. And then you just like we're always in the situation where it's like we'll talk about as a generic example on Day the Earth Stood Still, a film with great effects. Was a good movie before the studio screwed it up. That's all it is. Keanu Reeves actually gave a brilliant performance. I saw a cut where he actually gave a really great performance, but they cut that out of the film in favor of something else. But the point is that we did a budget on that film 38 times, and they had a number in mind that they wanted to hit, and we kept coming in too high, like at 18 or 28 million, and they wanted it to be at 12 million. And every couple of weeks, we get a new script and we start budgeting it again. And then I remember in one specific meeting, they added on a new end of the movie where Gort marches down Fifth Avenue in New York from Times Square all the way to the harbor with the entire U.S. Army attacking and all the buildings being destroyed and Gort doing what Gort did and all this stuff. And then he gets into the water and he picks up a sphere and wanders off. And you just sit there and go, so we're at 18 million and you just added 12 pages of the biggest stuff ever and you want us to be at 12. How do you think we can do that? And they said, you're smart, figure it out. And you go, but ain't gonna happen.
Kind of heartbreaking.
Yeah.
You mentioned. Sorry, you were gonna say.
Yeah. Feel free to cut me off. Don't be so polite. I'll go on forever if you let me.
No, I'm Australian. We're quite easy to jump. But no, like if you want, like if you had something to add to that.
No, it's just more wincing and moaning.
Well, I mean, you mentioned before about visionaries and tech. Do you think that there's ever a time when kind of having the happy medium, or this way, like you think artists benefit them in a lot of ways? Obviously, you look at, let's say, James Cameron, when having technical understanding definitely that strength, and maybe you're not relying so much. You can now trust your gut. You've got to make a lot of decisions without necessarily go. Do you think kind of having that balance?
Yeah, I think it's mandatory. actually, and it goes both ways. Because you look at a guy like John Dykstra, there's a guy that's a visionary, but he's also technically savvy beyond belief, and that's why he's so good at it. He has a great eye, and he knows, he can build stuff. He has friends, that build stuff, and they made the Dykstra Flex, and they figured out basically all the modern techniques that we're using still today. And brings up so much. And then you have the techies that aren't visualists, and they just try to shut you down. And like a common complaint from artists is, why would you ever shoot something like this? And to which I say, please join us on set someday. And when they visit, they are just shocked and awed that, you mean the whole company doesn't stop and allow you to set the light and put the witness cameras up, and the actor's fine with doing 4 takes because he didn't hit the mark right, and blah 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 blah. They're shocked that visual effects are still treated like crap on set. It's still, no, your first shot up in the morning, and then at 8 o'clock at night they go, okay, well, you've got about a minute before we're going to pull the plug, so go ahead. They don't. The real world experience of the disrespect for visual effects out there is kind of it goes in 2 interesting directions. One, I put on my Visual Effects Society hat. What drives the box office for the last decade, and still continues to do so, is what the visual effects people add to a movie. It's like Marvel won't have a product if it weren't for us. I always say, when you look at those Transformer movies, when I give lectures, I go, how many people came to the movie to see Shia LaBeouf act? It's like that we're generating the box office. At the same time, we have so much disrespect from, we have no union, we have no health insurance, we have no pension plan. They still think of us as pocket protector wearing, geeks who are just on a set because isn't it cool to be on a movie set? If I had a nickel for every time one of the crew said to me at the premiere of the cast and crew screen, if I'd known that's what you're doing, I would have been helpful, and so given all this stuff, in which how to solve it's a completely separate conversation and very long, because I've been working on it now for what year this is? I've been working on this for 22 years now, trying to solve it. But I think that all the technicians on set, or artists, depending which one you're talking about, should have to go and do something. Like on this show, I invited my cameraman, who kept telling me I didn't need a blue screen, or I didn't need, anything, and my key grip, who was literally using house roof tarps as blue screens, and I don't know what he was doing with the rest of them. Just come on in, and all you got to do is, if it's so easy for me to do, come on in and spend a day doing it. I want to see everybody in my movie.
On your amazing screen.
Yeah. All I got is long-haired people wearing fur cloaks, okay? In the wind, standing in trees in forests or amongst grass, and and they're going, no, it's so easy. You just pull your mat. You come on down to Roto. You have an open invitation. But back to your point, by having rotoed, by having composited, by having tried to light on my own, by having to operate a camera on my own, and then by having to do all that under a deadline and a budget, taught me oodles and oodles of things, so that when I'm on set, I can make the sacrifice knowing what the cost is going to be, or I can dig my heels in knowing what the cost will be on both sides. So there have been times when I have, and I expect all the artists to boo me right now, where I've said, don't worry about it. We can fix that. We can roto it. We can do it. No, you don't need to, whatever. Although if they offer, I would never stop them. And on the other hand, I've literally stood in front of a camera and said, there's no point in shooting this because there's absolutely no way we can fix what you're about to shoot. So I'm going to stand here till we either fix it or we kill the shot. That's the end of that. Doesn't make you a popular guy. If you want to be popular, don't do visual effects. Unless all you want to say is, don't worry about it, we'll fix that. Oh, blue screen, don't need one. Oh, makeup, don't need it. Oh, the blood doesn't, you don't want to do the blood anymore? Okay, fine, don't put the blood on, we'll do it later. Oh, the costumes are, we'll do it later. On this movie, I had the costume people come up to me and explain to me how easy it is for me to add snow on the costume.
Easy.
Yeah, and so because our AD on this film was a little languid, I was able to explain in the middle of the set with the actor standing there what we do to put the snow on them, and then picked up a handful of snow and threw it at the actor and said, "Oh my God, it's done. All we got to do is shoot that." Or we could spend 8 weeks, tracking shapes and doing fur interactions and, that. And I go, "And what did this cost, by the way?" "Oh, this costs you bending down and picking up a handful of snow, whereas it would have cost me to track the snow on a cut-by-cut basis somewhere between, I don't know, $12,000 and $30,000, depending what else is going in the shot. I figure this sequence is 36 shots, so that comes out to, it's easy, $500,000. Okay, so you could throw the snow at him or give me $500,000. Your choice."
I think that's like a really good point because you're right. Like the more people don't have an understanding, we did some snow on a shot once. Like no, you're not in the context. You saw falling snow. That does not mean the same as
Right.
Let's say a character walking out of water, fully covered in snow, and their hair blowing in or whatever. Do you think that like having the new breed of a lot of directors these days having a visual background, at least some coming out having some kind of inkling of the process, respect for it, kind of help that where they at least know what they're talking about? No, you think that this makes them more ambitious?
No. I tell you, there's two principles at operation in that. First principle is visual effects people have screwed themselves because we've never approached it the way that cinematographers approach their art. We've sold computers and software and all the behind the scenes are, look, we hit this button and this happens and we do that and shots together. So the majority of those perception out there is visual effects is easy. One of the, as an aside to the aside, one of the things I always say at the VES awards things is the way you guys look at visual effects is the same as me saying, I have Leonardo da Vinci's paintbrush, so I guess I can paint now. It's not the tool, it's the artist involved. The second fork in the road for all this has to do with the fact that the director, you got to understand the politics of making a movie. A kind, smart, and experienced visual effects director who's successful, of which I believe there's only one. All the rest have made movies and failed. But this guy will throw you under the bus because there's so much pressure on a director. They do what they got to do to get what they got to get done. If it means their knowledge of what we can do means you got to spend more money, he or she is willing to say, yeah, it's fine. I'm now back on schedule. So it's two bad things going on, and we don't get any sympathy. And there's really, wouldn't it be a different industry if, studios and directors and producers, wanted this compositor, wanted that modeler, and they knew their names instead of saying, oh, there's 3 million people in the credits. We can't have that. They're all visual effects guys. What the hell do they all do?
And they're the ones who made the credits.
Yeah. And when you think about what it is they do, we're the ones that made your fucking movie. That's what they do. You're going to tell me that your greens guy, and I'm not, don't want to get in trouble with the greensmen, but you're going to tell me that guy that put that shrubbery right over there in the left-hand corner of the frame, you're cool with his name going there. But the guy that saved you 3 days of shooting on this set, he's not worthy. That team of people that fixed this shot is not worthy. So don't tell me that there are too many visual effects credits in a movie. That's ridiculous. And that's what I tell them. Even the director on this movie and the producer were going, well, nobody reads them anyway. And I go, yeah, that's right. So let's have no credits. Why don't we just have a website? No credits on them. Because nobody cares who directed it either, or nobody gives a fuck who produced it, really. So, meanwhile, let's diss the guys that actually, stayed up for 37 weeks at making your movie for you, because you guys were so disorganized and had such high hopes that you never actually built the set to shoot or hired the right actor or whatever.
It's pretty mind-blowing. Like, I remember doing that film and Sony come up with a model, like, let's save some money by really cutting down like half the credit allotted. But on top of that, we'll play back the credits twice the speed on a saved film. So, but you're right. Like, any chance they can, it's like, let's just visual effects. It'll just be like, and the visual effects department, scroll back on the full music, go from there.
Yeah. And God knows I need the 37 producers' assistants on the film. Without them, what would we have ever done.
Catering, rendering, animal
Wait a minute.
wranglers.
Wait a minute. Catering counts.
Actually, I take that back.
Without them, nobody's shooting.
Some of the best food I've had is the craft trucks and craft servers. Yeah. No, that's really cool. Like, I don't know, just switching gears for a moment, but like, what do you think are some of the more memorable projects you've worked on? Is like 30, 80 years like that? I was reading up.
Yes, sadly it is. My favorite projects for different reasons are like Blood Diamond. That was an experience living in Africa for 8 months that changed my life. Last Samurai was another one of them. Deep Blue Sea was another one because the movie that was released is not the movie we went in to shoot. I'll circle back to that. And The Last Starfighter and another film that probably nobody saw, Lolita, because we did incredible stuff in those films, and Red Planet for other reasons. But which film did I say circle back to?
Deep Blue Sea.
Yeah, Deep Blue Sea. Yeah, we made Deep Blue Sea, and Rennie, the director, Rennie Harlan, wanted to make a serious horror film, and we shot a serious horror film, and we previewed it, and it did not test well. We came in and completely re-edited the film, sometimes using bits before they said action, and LL Cool J, which was his first movie role, I think. He was a throwaway character.
Sorry to cut you off, but I'll just quickly say, as soon as you mentioned, doing serious, as soon as you casted LL Cool J, it takes it in a whole different.
Yeah, well, there you go. But he was a throwaway character, and ended up ending up as one of the stars of the movie. And I had a great experience. That was my third film in a row with Sam Jackson, and Sam called me up one night. We're all in Mexico at the Baja Rosarita Studios. First film after Titanic in that studio. And Sam calls me up and he goes, have you read these pages? And I said, yeah. And he goes, do you see what he wants me to say for 7 pages of a monologue that starts off with, you think water's bad. You haven't seen anything till you've seen snow. And so Sam was telling me, bemoaning how horrible this dialogue was, all this stuff. So Sam and said, you should just kill me. And I said, Sam, we could. I said, if you can get to the right spot, I can have a shark come out of the water and kill you. And nobody will be expecting it because you're not supposed to die here. And so Sam and I got all on top of that. And so the next day we're going to shoot the scene, and he kept hitting one spot 6.5 pages early. And Rennie kept going, no, go back. You got to make it, get the whole walk. And he goes, no, this and that. So we put it together with one of the takes that Rennie didn't like. And Rennie was furious with me because I killed the star of his movie. And we tested
the most
it.
Memorable part of the film.
The test went through the roof. And so that was because Sam didn't want to say the dialogue, but Rennie was really pissed off at me for doing it. But there you go.
I think it's cool, though. I mean, if you get that opportunity to actually augment the script, shift it back into a slightly better direction, at least.
Well, we had fun. That's the point. And then that scene actually dictated, the attitude for the rest of the movie, which should be more fun and unexpected.
I was talking to a buddy of mine who used to work for Autodesk years ago, like would have been a decade ago or something. He kept saying like, "Oh, you got to beat Jeff sometime. Like he's an amazing guy, blah blah blah." And I guess he met you at a conference or something, but he was mentioning a story about Blood Diamond of mine that I guess director, there's a child or a character in the movie had a missing arm, like a little kid. The whole plan of that was meant to cast someone did have a missing limb. He wanted to give him a gift of giving like a prosthetic arm like that as a gift to film. Is that correct? But you guys then were out. Yeah,
that was the intention. That was one of the reasons why Blood Diamond was such a life-changing film. There's no shortage of people in Africa missing legs due to the uncharted minefields. So we went to cast them, and we were told you can't cast anybody that's missing a limb. You're not allowed. So we had to cast a kid and take his arm off, digitally take it off. But it was a weird day. There was Leonardo DiCaprio and Jennifer Connelly walking and talking, and they rack focused to the kid, and the kid had no idea what we were doing, and I wrapped his arm in glue, and we did all this stuff, and through a translator we were trying to explain to them what we were doing, which they were absolutely awed at. We would even want to do that, and he kept trying to drag this friend of his in who was missing an arm, and they kept separating these two. And what happened that day is all those kids in that scene. We shot the scene. It's supposed to be in a little monastery out in the middle of the jungle with a guy with a heart of gold who has all the kids. We got all the kids from an orphanage, because the areas we were shooting were very poor and everybody was very appreciative of anything. And so we bussed them in, and they got breakfast and lunch and dinner, and they got to keep the wardrobe and the whole thing. And on the way back to the orphanage, they were held up and robbed, and everything was taken from them. And that's the reality in that area in Africa. Anyway, so the crew pulled together and took all of their per diem for 1 month and started a foundation that, we hired a guy and everything, and we watched over it. And it only ended this time that we shot that movie in 94 or 5 or something. And the foundation finally ran out of money 2-3 years ago. But what it did is it dug wells for fresh water, which is really needed there. It gave school kids pencil and papers. Sometimes we put roofs over their head. We got doctors. And that was the most amazing thing, to see a crew come together and, sacrifice absolutely nothing to them, but it meant everything to this thing. And it was all started with that thing. And I know that Leonardo DiCaprio would be furious, but he doesn't like anybody to know what he did. But he did some amazing stuff there that we found out about. Amazing stuff. He and Jaimin and Jennifer Connelly and Ed Zwick, the director, they all ended up pitching in quite a bit. And that's why the film, not only were we telling a true story, or a story based on truth, not a true story, but we ended up learning so much and getting involved in so many people's lives, and it was amazing. During that film, I got trapped in a revolving door with Nelson Mandela, which was very weird.
It's a good Boston.
Yeah, it was really weird. We were stuck in this thing, and I just come in from shooting, so I had all gear on and standing there. I go, so you're Nelson Mandela? And he goes, yes. And you are? And I said, I'm me. And he goes, well, it appears we are stuck together. There must be a reason. And I said, I got to tell you, I saw your art exhibit down in the rocks in Sydney, and I've been blown away, not so much by your art, but by the poster for your art. And he was very gracious about that. But there was a lot of other stuff that, that happened on that film and happened in those locations. It just changes your worldview for the best. And the elevator pitch of what it does is that there's people who have nothing who are happier than we're ever going to be with everything. That's something to think about. It was really an eye-opening experience. And we made a good movie. And one of the things that, I did is I got to shoot a part of the behind-the-scenes documentary one day. And our technician, who's from Freetown, Sierra Leone, we're shooting him, interviewing him about how are we doing with the movie and the subject material, where are we wrong, where are we right, and all that stuff. And the visual effects producer, Tom Bowen, my guy I've worked with for 17 years, he goes, ask him what diamonds mean to him. And so I asked him, and this guy who had been, mercenary and seen it all, it's long silence. Tears start rolling down his face. He goes, diamonds mean death. Diamonds mean children's death. And it was like a chilling moment. It was something that also changed everybody's. It was an amazing experience. It's awesome.
It sounds like it's, you get life experiences like that, and Michael. It's a bit of a contrast.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
Actually, I was just texting a buddy from ILM the other day, just like, hey, how's it all going? And he's like, it's Saturday at 9:00, fixing a shot that Michael Bay unapproved, for, the second time. He's like going back from approving it, reworking it. For me, it's just brought back great memories of I don't miss that. I think there's one shot I worked on, a Transformers 3 that the girl I was dating at the time, and I nudged her. I'm like, yeah, see that whole city being destroyed? I did that. And then about a minute later, I'm like, oh wait, no, it was this shot. I couldn't even tell my own work just because you're so desensitized to what's going on.
Yeah.
And that's the thing too, is for me, I had this conversation the other day. I just moved to Portland from LA weeks ago. It's totally such a huge contrast here, but I just did it because I love the city. And I was talking with people about Do, and that was one of the things after kind of hearing so many people talk about this film and that film and all the great visual visual effect. Occasionally you get to work on films that are what you consider to be a real movie. For me, it's like working Blade, some bullshit like that just doesn't have that appeal. But then you work on movies like a Robert Zemeckis film and like that, where like, wow, it's something that it's a cinema that you can look back and be proud of. Rather, some I think it's the job, but other ones proud of. It isn't. As I said before, like those visual effects shots, you can't even tell what was yours and.
Yeah. I've been there. But hey, that's a visual. No, that's not a visual effect shot.
So I might have my memory backwards, but do you like to put penguins to effect shots as well?
I do.
A thing you do?
Yeah,
so okay, how did that start? What kind of film projects you might have penguins hiding in the background?
It started on the Last Starfighter. Where all the studio executives wore their suits and would come and give us very weird notes. The director, Nick Castle, he said, they look like Gumbies, don't they? And I go, yeah, they look like Gumbies. And I said, we could texture the entire underside of the alien bat ship with the shape of Gumby. What do you say? So we did that, and nobody knew it. And, we all chuckled every time the shot came up. That was our ode to them. So when I realized on that film that you could put stuff right in front of people's eyes, I started studying things, brain things, about what the brain sees, why it sees it, why it doesn't see it, what the field of view of the eye is, how much of the screen, depending where you sit, can you actually take in, all these weird things. And I discovered that I should try an experiment. So I started off with a moose. So I started putting mooses in shots. The most prevalent one is in Cameron Crowe's film Elizabethtown. They stop at a gas station and there's this stuffed horse on the side of the gas station, but now it has moose antlers. And nobody has ever seen that. Then we started sticking penguins everywhere because I decided that penguins were funnier looking than moose. And so if you look at The Last Samurai really carefully, because Ed Zwick's a taskmaster. There's the sequence on the parlay field, right? And you're over the Japanese army looking at the samurai. Well, every one of those samurai is a penguin wearing a samurai. And when you're over the samurai looking at the Japanese, every one of those Japanese is a penguin wearing a Japanese army suit. When you look at the Cannon Ridge, all those people running back and forth are penguins wearing suits running back and forth. And we just started sticking them in all over the place in that movie. In the original Fantastic Four that I went in as a fix-it guy for Fox on it, there's a sequence where the bad boy and Stretchy Boy are having a big fight. And the bad guy shoves a bus and it goes sliding across an intersection into a bank. There's a family of penguins standing on the top of the steps on the bank. In Blood Diamond, when they're leaving Freetown, there's a mass exodus, and the shot is a big wide shot, and it's a diagonal road. The diagonal from upper right corner to left, bottom left. It's all these people, refugees leaving. Well, you look really big, badly composited too. In the bottom left corner, closest to the camera, it's another family of penguins. If you look in Red Riding Hood, the big scene where, what's his name? I never remember his name. The guy from Sid and Man. Inspector Gordon in all the Batman movies. A great actor.
Oh, right. Yeah.
He comes riding in on a white horse.
Gary Oldman.
But it's really, Gary Oldman. You really look. As soon as he passes the gate, a family of penguins walk across the gate. And nobody sees these things. And, I would always show it to the director and get it approved. I never sneak in anything that they're unaware of. And on this movie right now, I'm still trying to get a live penguin, but I have a penguin. There's a shadow of a penguin, a very large, prominent shadow of a penguin. And there are a few other penguins hidden in it. But we do it for two reasons. One, it's just I love the optical illusion. I love being able to put something plain and obvious in front of people and nobody seeing it. And I actually lost a job because of this. What's his name? The French director who did Greenhorn. He actually threw me out of his office in an interview because he just didn't. He thought I was making fun of him. When I told him, I said, "No, we're going to put penguins in some shot." And he was like, "Why would you do that?" I go, "It's very funny. I look, it's here. And he goes, "You were making fun." It went on. Anyway. And I love doing it. I think it's fun, and I like hiding, Easter eggs for people to see. The director on
awesome.
the director on this film, when I showed him the penguin, and he said, "Yeah, you can have that." He goes, "I have something else I want you to sneak into the movie, so I'm sneaking something else for him." It's going to be huge, and it's being done by Rising Sun down in Adelaide. So
I did an episode with a year ago. They're also such great work. I think their first Hollywood effects or Red Planets. Back in the day.
Yeah. I found them and hired them. It's an interesting experience too, because I was told we had to hire an Australian company for the tax break.
That's what we did.
Yeah, and so we were on the Fox lot, and Animalogic's on the Fox lot, and that didn't work out well with Animalogic. So I started looking, and I found Rising Sun. Those guys did great work for me, and they've been on every movie I've done.
I really like RSP a lot. I've been working in Australia a long time, but I think Animal's gone through a lot of growth in the years. I think it's definitely, especially being the only place that Hollywood filmed. I've never officially worked for Animal, but I've known those guys for so long and purpose tiptoed around it. Even when we did, actually, I said Red Sun with code for Superman Returns when we shot that at the slot, and even then, like technically, Animalogic had contractions that way they could be only visual effects on the. So even then, when my office set up, weren't allowed to call ourselves a studio because then they'd be breaching contract. So we had to essentially be a part of the production. All this kind of stuff that Animal had been, I guess, smart enough to Xari and those guys to put that in place so that way.
Yeah, it was smart for them, but I love Animalogic now, but back then, I wish they would have said, "Well, we just don't want to work on it," because that was their attitude. We had difficulty scheduling things. It was one of those things that that again, it goes to what I like to say, the secret of politics. There's so much going on that you don't see. And when stuff stops making sense, you just got to know, from my vantage point now, that there's some politics going on somewhere that's making people do things that aren't rational.
Yeah, that's smart.
And then you got to chart a course around it somehow. But
I think it's smart. I mean, it's definitely a political game. Yeah, when it comes to certain project, trust your gut. Especially if you're in your, you got to find places that are you're already getting another beginning, a pretty good sign. Then again,
and it's not like I'm smart. I made some mistakes that got me blacklisted for years at a go. So I learned a lot of this politics the hard way. One of my, I give lectures from time to time. One of the most popular ones is called The Politics of Visual Effects. It's eye-opening to people when they take that giant step backward and look at all the forces at play, and then start to look at all the agendas and why, we all simplistically think everybody just wants to make a good film.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's not the case.
There's a lot of. Was that a FMX talk?
I think I did it at FMX, but it's gotten better since then. It was I did FMX. I did it at FMX when we did it off-site in a movie theater. It's very strange. They've grown so big. But anyway, it's a fun one. Not as fun as the illusion of the eye, but it's fun.
Yeah, there's a couple of us checking out just at a brief chance, but I'm interested after this call to jump back on it because there's a few great talks of yours floating. I'll definitely link to in the show notes.
Oh, do the UX11. That's one makes me look really smart.
I just started as before the call went to kill, so it's good. It definitely looks technical. I got a couple more questions and we'll start to wrap things up, but there's so much I wanted to dive into, but I think I'd be here all night. But I mean, for me, one of the things I thought was really interesting is first of all, let's just dive into the Visual Effects Society for a second. When did you get involved with those guys? And if you just give a quick introduction of what the Visual Effects Society is for anyone.
The Visual Effects Society is a professional honorary organization whose goal is to do two things: form a trusted community of visual effects artists, practitioners, and technicians, and to raise, shine a spotlight on what it is we do, trying to help us get more respect and more attention. There's a whole other conversation that goes along with that, why it's hard power versus soft power kind of thing. We don't have the hard power. The only way to get the hard power is if we could get every visual effects artist around the world to strike on the same week, then something would happen.
Yeah.
But short of that, as we're not a collective bargaining unit, we're not a union, we're not a guild, and we're not a trade organization by law. we can't get involved in those things. So we're a professional honorary society to form a trusted community, which means networking, sharing techniques. I'd like to think of it as just a big old fun clubhouse where you get to meet people you'd never normally meet and ask them questions, one-on-one, like what I've got to do with, Edlin and Ralston and Dennis Murin and so on and so forth. It started 20 years ago. I got involved in it 19 years ago, thinking it was a union. And I thought I was joining a union because I started, I started pushing for a union back in 1995. And I can say now that I raised enough of trouble that I got a meeting with the head of the union who basically threatened my life at that time. And I'll never understand that. As I said to him, I go, there's an opportunity for you to make more money. Why wouldn't you want to represent these group of people who desperately wish to be represented? Who is going to grow? And they were telling me I was upsetting the apple cart. And he said he was going to introduce me to the wrong end of a lead pipe. And then 3 years after that, I met with him again, and we had identical conversation. And then 5 years ago, the union called me up. IATSE called me up and said, we have a file on you that's amazingly thick, and we'd like you to come in and talk to us. So we went in to have this conversation. We met on neutral turf, and they said, the guy that you met with, the head of the union, has now retired, and we have a new head, and he wants to start a visual effects union. So I worked with them for a year and a half trying to get a visual effects union working, and ended up having to give up because they just never got it. In my opinion, the number one question they would have had to answer is, so how is joining a union, not getting a strong union in LA, not going to drive the rest of the work out of LA? And part B is, do you represent any other countries? And the answer to part A was, runaway production has nothing to do with us. And part B is, we have a handshake with Canada. I go, but what about, London, Europe, and Australia, and New Zealand, South America? They go, no, we got nothing to do with that. Then you go, so then, since all the business is in all those places, can you cover me in those places? They said no. Then we went to a meeting with, it'll come to me, I get them all confused between the Art Directors Guild, the Animation Guild. It was a cameraman, Local 600. And I brought a business guy with me, Bob Coleman. So so Bob and I were there, and we heard their whole pitch. And Bob asked the business guy, he goes, so are you going to waive the entrance fee for all the people? And they said no. And then I said, are you going to waive the entrance fee for all the members of this Visual Effects Society? And they said no. And then Bob said, so how long before we get all the benefits of being in a union? And after a lot of pressuring, they said, could be as long as 20 years. And I said, wait a minute. You're telling me that if we join the union, if we start paying you those dues, if we pay you that $6,000 entrance fee and the $300 and whatever it is a month, that I get nothing? Absolutely nothing for that, for maybe as long as 20 years? And they said, yeah. And explained to us that until the producers recognize that these are your collective bargaining representatives, they're under no obligation to offer you, overtime pay, time and a half on weekend, pension, health, or welfare. And
of course, they don't want to ever recognize that.
Yeah, the producers have no way to do that. And so we discovered that the way that they force producers to do that is if you can get 51% of the people to say that they want a union, they can take the producers to court, and then they may actually have to present all 51% of the people to testify if so asked. But it doesn't go there. So the point of all this is that being in a union, I'd killed being in a union.
Yeah.
Starting a union, it's like there's so much misinformation about what that means. Nobody is telling you that, it might be 20 years, might be never. It also might be 1 year. It's not likely, but we worked for pretty diligently for a while trying to get a union going. It just turned out there's so many people against it. Then we worked into trade organizations thinking we could get that going. That turned into a debacle as well because there is no such thing as a global trade organization. The Visual Effects Society, what they do is they convene people to have conversations that we moderate, hoping that something will come out of that. What came out of we had a number of meetings on trade organizations as well as unions. But what came out of the trade organization was basically London going, it's not in our interest to help you form a trade organization. We don't really want to do anything that might take any business away from London, and then all the territories that have, the benefit of that don't want a trade organization either. Then we try to come up with a different kind of a trade organization, which we call the workers' rights thing. So just agree that these are the human factor worker rights minimum. Nobody should have to sleep under their desk. Everybody should get to go home after 5 days. A work day at a max should not be more than 12 hours. If you're pushing people more than that, there should be some kind of compensation. People should be allowed to take the vacations that they have earned, and, that didn't fare much better either. And so what the society arrived at, we wrote a white paper on the state of the industry. What we ultimately arrived at, the only thing that we could do is educate business owners as to how to properly run a business and what's involved in good business and what's involved in bad business. And hopefully, if we can get more business owners acting in a business way instead of what Scott Ross famously titled The Race to the Bottom, they might be able to get to a place where we can at least live as human beings,
Yeah.
It's very complex matter. I'm oversimplifying it.
No, it is, and it's such a huge subject.
Yeah, and it's one of the great things about the society, though, is at least there's a place for people to get together and talk, and things happen when people get together and talk. There's been at least one instance where it turned out a lot of members were at a company, and the members went to the company and said, "This is how it's going to be," and the company said, "Well, then you're all fired." And something happened, and they had to all be hired back and got treated like humans instead of, replaceable drones.
Yeah, all I'll say about it, for me, has always been, sadly, I feel like essentially does hit rock bottom will change, and that's just because, if people were to happen, somebody's going to get very rich and they decide, well, I won't unionize, I'll get all the work. So essentially, you got to have that disruption that will cause change. Just setting it's such a complex machine, and sadly that there's so much money at stake. It's never going to be in our interest to actually help people stand up for humane rights for everyone.
No, what would be awesome is if every visual effects practitioner in the world got together and said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to stop. And the minute they stop, all hell's going to break loose. The problem is, and they tried to do this in the early 90s, they tried to form a trade organization, and they set illegally and unofficially a line beneath which no one would go. And as soon as they did that, the person that started it was the first one to go below that line and had a shitload of work.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with the whole industry is there's always somebody. It's the same in the sound industry, by the way, which I started, I had a sound company for a while. It's like, this is what it costs to do. Well, we don't want to pay that. We want to pay less than that. Well, we can't do it for less than that. Okay, well, this guy will do it. And then you go do it. Then that guy says, all right, instead of 12,000, I'll do it for 10,000. Then they call you up and goes, well, he said to do it for 10,000. You have the jobs. You can do it for 9. And you go, okay, I'm going to do it for 9 because it'll be good on my reel. It'll be good on our resume. And it'll introduce us to lots of other business. Then next thing you know, you get a phone call and goes, well, those guys said they do it for 8. So if you do it for 7, you got it. And you go, wait a minute, you said I had it at 9. They go, well, 7 now. And then there comes a point, it's a game of chicken. But if everybody in visual effects, just said there is a bottom line and no one's going to go below it, which is called collusion and illegal. But if they did it, the industry would change. When you think about it, the vendors, there's only 7 vendors to the visual effects industry, the major studios. Maybe 9 now, will include Netflix and Amazon. They're dictating the prices to us. And the only way, nobody's making money. And then the suspicion in the game from the roto guy and the compositor is that, the guy that owns a company driving the Porsche is making a shitload of money. The guy driving the Porsche is, about to lose lose everything he owns unless he gets another job, because job A is actually paid for by getting job B because A didn't cover what it costs, and so on and so forth. And part of the problem that we discovered in the white paper of this robbing Peter to pay Paul until it catches up with you, part of the problem in all this is that it gives you a false sense of security that every one of no company's, too big to fail. And you think they are. It's like ILM, Sony ImageWorks, Digital Domain, and all of well, that's another story. But they're one of the major issues with them is they had a robbing Peter to pay Paul problem interruption in the flow of cash that started the collapse. But that's another story. But then you have all these guys that I love who used to be at ILM or used to be here, and they've gone off on their own. They started their own company, and because the overhead is much different, they have a different pricing structure, and then you take advantage of that. But we don't take advantage of it to put them out of business. I have one vendor I use a lot, and he always charges ridiculously too little money, and I'm always going, can you stay in business on this? Because we have more money per shot than what you're charging. It's like $300 a shot. You got to be kidding me. I budgeted this for like $1,800 a shot. So what do you say? Take 12 a shot. You got to argue with them. And I go, no, I need you to stay in business because you're really good. But in the white paper, what we found too is that there's a model of many models of doing business, and one of them is, time and material. So let's agree that the company is entitled to make a 10% profit, and then we'll open up all the books to you, and you pay for the time and materials plus 10%. Well, the studios don't want to do that, because then suddenly when Michael Bay says, yeah, I know I finaled it twice, but it's unfinaled, they don't want to have to pay for it. And the problem with that the problem that exemplifies is when you look on a movie set, there's producers and a director. At the end of every day, the producers come to the director and they go, you're 2 days behind, or you're day ahead, or whatever it is. But in our case, you're 2 days behind. How are you going to fix that? And then they have to either cut scenes or they got to shoot faster or whatever it is, but they have a schedule and a budget. And the issue is that there's somebody there to ensure that you come in on that schedule or budget. In visual effects, there is no producer. There's a visual effects producer, but they're different than a movie producer. There's nobody there telling the director, who suddenly says, I know I asked for turtle, but now I really think it should be a panther. And nobody's there except for the visual effects guys to say, wait a minute, a tortoise is hugely different from a panther. Instead, the studio goes, yeah, we know, but that you bid it, and so now you got to pay. Well, we never bid a panther. They go, well, you bid $10 for the tortoise, so you got $10. It's like, whoa. So like you want the movie producer to stay on, and you want him to manage the director in the same way that you go, well, you said this scene would have 12 visual effects. Now it's got 48. Who's to go in and tell the director, can you fix this? Because we don't have money for 48. Instead, the first line at defensive, let's see if we do have money for it. Let's just see if we can make them do it, not pay them. See, and those are the areas where it would be really great if business people ran visual effects, who said, all right, well, here's what our visual effects producer is going to say this horrible word to you, and you've never heard it, I'm sure. It's called no.
It's a 2-letter one.
Yeah, and no. If you want to pay for it, yes, but no. Oh, come on, we're spending $2 million with you. Can't you just? It's like, no. Because we're giving you $5 million worth of work for $2 million. So stop.
Yeah, you got to think of it as physical assets. Do that, then it's like, well, wait a minute. You want to buy 20 cars with enough money for 5, not stealing. Because it is
exactly.
This time way more valuable.
Right, but they play us all off against each other, and they do the same thing to the big facility now. There's only one facility currently that is, what was the word that the head of that facility used? Besides, we're special. Whatever it was. It's like the normal laws don't apply to them because they have a built-in client that's spending hundreds of $millions a year for a number of years in a row. So they never suffer that, suddenly we don't have a job for 3 months because this movie postponed, but we'd already staffed up for it, and now I got to lay all these people off. They just go, no, we got it. It's covered. Don't worry about it. All the other companies, ILM, DD, MPC, Frame Store, Double Negative, who am I leaving out? Cinecite, all of them. They are not, ILM used to be, but they're not anymore. Exempt, that's the word, exempt from the laws. These guys now are being dictated to, it's like, do you think that Marvel Studios goes, well, here's the deal. You're going to do this show at this much money by this time, or you're never getting another Marvel show. And you think that they don't go and look at, okay, well, what could we fill this hole with? Oh shit, we're in huge trouble. Fuck, I guess, okay, fine. This is better than laying everybody off. Fine. We'll just do it. We'll just do it.
Take it on the chin.
Yeah. And, the period of time where they go, we'll do it if you give us a point in the film, or if we're a co-producer, they really flip that one back on, because we're not smart enough business people.
Yeah, no, the whole thing's really fascinating. I mean, and you're right. Like, going back for a second, if you look at Avatar, I remember in Sony and ILM were both. I didn't know what Avatar was at the time, but I'd be at dinner with the guys and curious where to basically negotiate it to not have to. They would take revisions on their head. Because of that, they do it at this certain price value, and they knew that long term it'll be great for them to not be charging for anything Cameron wanted, meaning that they're going to take a loss, but long term, especially now they're getting all the investment. But it means that I remember confidently a few of the guys at Sony like, well, when Weta will work in 5 years time or whatever, they need help from us. We'll charge them double the amount. I do remember ILM kind of getting a few of those shots at the time, but it is one of those side of there is that and it can't. Like, I was in Berlin out there, Kim Lebrier and ILM was going through a bit of a period where they shifted their model in a couple of years, and it was interesting. Like, for me, I was really fascinated at their just their whole business and how they kind of constantly changed till they found them that worked, because they couldn't do it at the least time was sustainable. And one thing that freaked Kim and those out was the fact that you would go to all these smaller student out of the box software, and they could, and there were bids that had put in that they came back and said what it cost you to bid out this entire charge rotor, and it was just like this complete shift. And coincidentally, going to ILM right after that, it was interesting how much of a reaction changed. A lot of that changed by drastic compensate. They did have that realization that there are students that were charging ridiculously less money still, and how do you adapt to BS while not having the massive overhead that you've got of two giant buildings, well, now a lot more than that. PR department, all these things that most students have there. You've got this giant monster got to run.
It's a crazy business. I'll just say it's amazing that anybody makes money in the long run. And, the number of companies that have been squeezed out, from the medium-sized companies to the large companies, and the number of small companies that have said, hey, we're going to do it. And then they go, wow, we can't make money. Phil Feiner, who used to be the head of Pacific Title, keeps a list of all the companies that go out, and it's really depressing. It's depressing. It's like there's a lot of really talented people that have either gone bankrupt and screwed their employees, or just folded the doors and said, we'll work till we're broke, and then that's it. And it's revealed a number of individuals in the industry. It's revealed some interesting personality types from guys that actually did just screw all their employees, walked away with the money, and just didn't pay people that they owed 8 months of work. That it's just shocking. And then there's other stories where somebody who wasn't an owner of a company, just sold everything they had and paid off people themselves, because it's just the right thing to do. Because visual effects artists, if we're nothing else, we're passionate and dedicated. And rarely do you see such a large group of people who will do something impossible just because it's really cool. And one of the great joys, I guess you would say, one of the coolest things for me is whenever I'm working with artists, I always say, here's the low bar expectation. Now I'm open for ideas. And I have absolutely no qualms about telling the director or the producer or the studio, it was this guy. He came up with this idea and he threw this shot together. I think it's really great. We should look at it. Yes, it's not what you wanted, but it's so much better.
Yeah, they contribute. I love that. I have taken up a lot of your time, so I'll have like 2 more questions and then I'll go. But one thing I did want to dive into really quick is Handbook, because that thing is a beast. And I just got to say personally, like, how the hell do you even approach it like that? I'm just curious, because I can't imagine that's to approach.
You should mention it, because we're just starting the 3rd edition today.
Cool.
Being a guy that read the ASC manual for years, I always wondered why we didn't have one for visual effects. So Susan Zwerman and I got together and just pitched it to a lot of people, and everybody in the book has volunteered their work to write and contribute it. So we as editors, all we got to do is check for consistency, check for facts. Every one of them is an expert. And the hard part is there's a page limit. So there's so much more that needs to go in there. But the intention is it's supposed to serve two different audiences. One is, be an educational tool, student people getting out there. The other one is serve professionals who may not have experience in one area or another. Not only does it give you a quick, reference guide, at least you'll have the terms down, but it also subtly gives you people to contact. So the third edition, which we're starting today, we have so much work to do. We've revamped the whole layout of the book so it doesn't have to be so many pages and the type doesn't have to be so big and the margins don't have to be so big and yet not lose anything. But we have, the whole VR, AR, and AI to throw in that new stuff to the book. But we also have to update, all the cameras and chips, software, hardware, modern techniques, and weed out some of the more antiquated stuff, but not a whole lot of it because the students need to know. I'm a firm believer that you need to know your history in order to get to the future. Yeah.
So, no, I think it's pretty cool. And how long did that take to write?
According to the contract, this will be published in July of 2019, and we have to pretty much turn in our rough drafts this year and all that stuff. But and we hope to have the online, more robust online version of it as well. We've been limited by rights and clearances before. We think we have new tools to deal with that. But what a wonderful platform to say, you should write me if you want to write an article, a section, or help on the book.
I'll definitely put that out there.
Yeah, we're looking for new talent and new experts. So all can write me at jeffokun@aol.com. That's the address I give out for stuff. That's awesome. I have Gmail accounts too, but anyway.
I was going to ask if you had a CompuServe.
CompuServe. I remember it well.
That's like sending someone to your showreel page on GeoCity. I don't know. So yeah, I kind of love the fact that kind of answered a lot of the questions I had. Like one of the big things that I really wanted to push your opinion on, do you think that artists should get their head around effects more so they can protect themselves, create more opportunities themselves? I think that you've already shed a bit of light on that one.
Yeah. So I got to say that what I did graduate in college, what I went to college for, because I made a deal with if I got something real, then they helped support me while I tried to get a job. But anyway, I studied international marketing and management, and those courses and the real world experience they taught me formed a foundation that enabled me to earn a shitload of money. How's that? More money than I ever thought I would earn. It's not that much. It's not like Dykstra money. But from going from a guy earning $500 a month to the next job earning $647 a week to the next job $2,000 a week was awesome. Yeah. But all of that business acumen.
Yeah. No, I think it's a critical thing that most artists that be proud. It's like, I don't yourself in the foot. And that's where I feel the same way of like understanding programming. That way you can learn to automate, essentially give a lot levity. You're not restricted in front of you. I think those are so critical to have. I'm an artist. We're meant to be starvers, starving artists. We're meant to suck at. And I hate that.
Yeah, it's important. People don't, not even one of the key things, the accidental consequences, unintended consequences is that if you get a good foot in how business run and the whole what business is, it gives you a certain kind of confidence to ask for things that you wouldn't otherwise ask for, and it helps your demeanor in your negotiations for yourself. It's a real valuable thing.
No, I love it. And I'm just curious, like, what's your opinion about remote work? Do you think that we're at a point now, cloud rendering, amazing tools, and how a pipeline artist can, let's say, work from home or set up a facility anywhere without your graphics stuck in? Let's say I want to go sit on the beach in Hawaii and knock out VFX.
I'm a big fan of that. The only downside, the only thing that's standing in its way currently is all these security measures.
It's true, yeah. Anything Marvel, forget about it.
Marvel's the one who's driving all the security. The VES, again, put together a bunch of security procedures, got it signed off by everybody in the industry, from studios to facilities, and the only holdout was Marvel. In the end, Marvel, caved the whole thing. And, it's the old case of one bad apple ruins the barrel. I don't know how. I can't do my job without access to the internet or without a thumb drive. And in all the years I've done this, I've never once sold a movie on the internet or anything. So I get their concerns. I'm not, making them small, but at the same time, it helps you do a better job. It's got to be a better way to protect this stuff than penalize the people who are creating.
Absolutely.
That's all I'm saying.
Final question. I guess just to leave it on this, but do you have any advice for, young budding VFX artists, a career into their own hands? I don't know, just more kind of make their. I think a lot of people pile into, as you said a few times, you taking to trust everyone a little too much, and fizzle out, not be able to have the mindset.
Yeah, I got a few things. Remember I mentioned, Jeff Alexander. The night before I went to work for Saul Bass, he called me over to his house and he poured us each a scotch. And he said to me, I'm going to tell you 3 things. And if you follow these 3 things, you're going to be fine. And remember, this is a guy who started in the industry in the late 20s, early 30s. So if he's telling it to you, and if I'm telling it to you almost 100 years later, I mean, it's still valid. Which the first thing is believe me, no matter what, let me blow this now, number 1, you don't need the experience. Number 2, it's not going to be that much fun. And number 3, no matter what they say, they're not going to make it up to you on the next. Those are 3 things that have been consistent. And what's key, what's key to driving that is, and people starting out don't really get this, is that you have a value, and the value is based on 2 things. 1, what's your market worth based on your talent and experience? And number 2, what do you view your market worth as? So I know lots of people that go, I'll do it for free just to get my foot in the door, because they're going to make it up to me on the next, and the next one comes and they do in their budget and they go, oh, I'll get this guy to do it for free. So there's no budget there. And so you end up doing project after project after project for free. And for that individual, you will never get paid what you're worth ever. It's always going to be an uphill struggle. And this goes for me when movie actor, big time movie stars go, hey, I'm doing this little, thing, do you think you could help me out and do this, for nothing, and I always, because I'm starstruck, I always go, oh yeah, no problem. Like one of them who's a really big name, I've done free stuff now for 10 years. Well, I bought mansion after mansion and, private jets and blah, 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 blah. And I go, come on, man. He once gave me a bottle of wine, but in his eyes, I'm worth exactly what he's paying me, nothing, because that's what I set my. Another thing for people starting out that's really important is 2 things. One is learning to get an eye and learning to pivot. So under learning to get an eye, it's like I can't draw, but I spent years trying to draw, so at least I know what I'm doing, what I'm looking at. I know how light interacts, get it. I understand lighting direction. I understand canvas size, lens size, format size. I take a lot of photographs, blah, blah, blah. I'm always trying to, improve on that art. And I've spent a lot of time learning software, not because I ever thought I'd be on a box, but because I need to know how hard what I'm asking to do is. And now at the stage I'm at, I have a lot of friends that are artists, and if I have a question, I can go to them and tell me what we not jokingly refer to as the pain factor. They'll go, yeah, this can be done. It's like an 11.5 scale of 1. It's really important tools. And then on the other side of that equation, it's at the pivot side, it's really important to understand that there's no way to explain it. When you're in a boat and you're rowing towards the other shore, the current takes you. You may not land where you wanted to land. You can land where you wanted to land if you tip the boat into the current and row really hard. But sometimes you need to let the river take you where it wants to, because it's providing you a pivot, the opportunity to do something else. So the best example of that is I wanted to be an astronaut. Well, that wasn't going to happen. So a comedian, that didn't work out. Then a magician. Yeah, well, magicians don't make money. Then a rock guy. Well, rock guys don't make money. So then a rock producer, they didn't make money. But suddenly I was in a position to take pictures of really big stars like Jimi Hendrix, and that's part of the current of the river that started off with magic and trick photography into rock and roll, moving rock and roll equipment, failing that led me into the Depression, that led me getting the job for Saul Bass, that led me into editing, that led me into visual effects. I had if you would have said, what do you want to be? I tell you, I would have been, I want to be a comedian. I want to be an astronaut. I want to be Buddy Rich. I want to be the world's greatest drummer, whatever. But it never was, I want to be in films and I want to do effects. So the current effect, the pivot, is see what the forces are directing you into doing, and sometimes you might want to taste it, see if isn't that something fun. For me, it was easy because it was a button push. There are better buttons to push in editorial than there were in music, So, except for when I was an engineer for a while, there's a lot of great buttons. But visual effects has even cooler buttons because they're buttons in your head. So, I guess if you boil that down, it's learn your art, at least develop your eye. The other thing is take a wider scope of view or field of view on what's going on out there and look at places that you can more easily get into. You just never know where something's going to lead, which of course contradicts the first law, which is you set your value by what you charge. Sometimes it is worth it to just say, I'm going to do this because I love doing it. I made a feature film on Super 8 with the star of a soap opera, and I learned a heck of a lot. I did it because I really enjoyed learning this stuff, but that because I was working for Saul at the time as a gopher, that was sort of where I first, without realizing it, got into visual effects, doing really goofy in-camera stuff on a Super 8 camera. And just simple stuff like being able to go, no, we'll shoot the scene backwards. That's all there is to it.
No, I love it. I love all that. Cool. Well, I'll later over that. I appreciate every time you great all the history of visual effects, but also your career. So I think I'm just curious, like for anyone who wants to find out more about you, any links or place online you recommend that?
No. I don't know how to find me. I don't have a website or anything. But I'll tell you this. Anybody can write me with any question, or if you want to send me hate emails, I've got my fair share over the years. I'm okay with that.
People have too much spare time on their hands.
What we call the kerfluffle, the joint coming together, Life of Pi winning, but Bill Westerhofer being cut off by the Jaws music while there was some kind of a picket going on outside by visual effects people, and being misquoted by my no longer good friend David Cohn, who was interviewing me from a phone backstage while I was at home, generated a year of hate mail. It was very entertaining in a really sick way. Wow. But anyway, you feel free to write me, Jeff Okun at AOL.com. It's OKUN as in North, no spaces, no dots. Otherwise, I just love to see new talent get ahead. So
that's awesome. Well, thank you again for this call. Great.
No, thank you. I appreciate your time.
All right. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. Check out the show notes at www.alanmckay.com/78. And I'll also post links in there to get to the Inner Circle list if you want to check out all the free training I'm going to be putting out over the next 2 months, as well as information about the mentorship and a lot of other really cool stuff. Next episode will be a episode I'm putting together which is on accelerated learning. So that subject is more to do with a lot of hacks to retain information, to learn information more efficiently, and even things like going through tutorials or going through podcasts, whatever it is, and really being able to take a lot of that in. Because a lot of us, we tend to go for fancy solutions like, oh, I'm going to learn about speed reading, and getting really good at being able to go through a book extremely fast and remember nothing at all. And there's just a lot of quick hacks and things like that that can be really valuable for that sort of thing. And yeah, I figure it'd be really great to kind of jump on a lot of that and talk about a lot to do with that subject. As I mentioned before, there's a bunch of really cool episodes coming up. I'm going to be interviewing the team at Image Engine, primarily about all their creature work. That's going to be really cool, as well as Main Road Post. And that's going to be another awesome episode. I'm really excited about that one as well. Man, there's so many id Software. So I'm interviewing a lot of teams, a lot of studios, which is going to be awesome. And yeah, there's so much coming out. I'm excited. I can't really hide that, obviously. So that is it. Check out the show notes, alanmckay.com/78. And that's it for now. So I will see you next episode. Rock on.